So this is Matt Wenning at WenningStrength.com, and today we're going to kind of switch gears and talk some stories. So I think the first story that we should talk about is Ed Coan. So I go do one of my first meets as maybe it's my last meet as a teenager. As you know, I'm 41 now, so it's getting to be quite a long time ago. But I was doing a meet in northern Indiana. Now, Ed Coan was from the Chicago area, and I had no idea he would be there, but I'm at this meet up in the northern Indiana area. I think it's the first meet I squat 700 pounds, which was a big deal. And this short guy comes up to me and introduces to me as Ed Coan, and I'm like, holy shit, right? Like, this guy's a legend. He watches me squat this 700 pounds, and he comes up to me and goes, if you keep it up and you don't get injured, one day you're going to squat in the high 8s, 900 pounds. Now, you got to remember, this is before the advent of massive amounts of gear. There was really only single ply, like Z-suit squat. So an 800-pound squat was a very, very big deal. And I was already squatting 700 pounds, I think, as one of my last meets as either a teenager or first meet as a junior. And we became friends at that point. So I would say a year later, I'm calling him and I want to go someplace else to train for a little while, keeping in mind that I'm already driving to Columbus, Ohio, which is about a 3-hour drive, to kind of have some interaction with Chuck Vogelpool and Louis Simmons. I decide that weekend I'm going to go up and visit Ed Coan at Quad's Gym, which is in Calumet City. I'm not so sure it's there anymore. I think the North store is there, but I don't think the South is anymore. You might have to talk to Eddie about that to find out. But I walk in, and his training crew is just first coming in, and this is when I watch him deadlift. I want to say 925 for 2 reps. I mean, now I want you to keep in mind, there's probably only 2 or 3 guys in existence before that point that had deadlifted 900. He just pulled 920 range for 2, and he only weighed like 235. It was some of the most insane things that I've ever seen in my life. The ability for him to not only be patient with that weight leaving the ground and having the grinding strength and the technical ability to be able to do those kind of weights was just totally crazy. And that wasn't the first time that I visited Quad's Gym. That was towards the latter years of Ed Coan's training protocol. But I used to drive up there, occasionally or as much as I could, which wasn't very often because at that point I was in college. And what I was studying was very hard for me to get great grades because I knew I had to get a master's to do what I wanted to do. But the times that I was able to go to Quad's Gym and watch Eddie train, I think the next time I went up there, he benched 550 for 3 reps at 230 body weight. The times that I got to watch him do those things it was almost like a shock system. Like, you go as a kid and watch these guys do this. Some people would just be impressed with it, but what it did to my mind was it taught me that almost anything was possible. I just watched a guy that underweighed me by, at that time, probably about 50 pounds, do things that were completely out of my wheelhouse. But what it did show me is that those weights were achievable if I wanted to work hard enough and long enough. Now, as we all know, I never got to that 900-pound deadlift. I did beat you in the bench, though, Eddie, but I never got to that damn deadlift. You always kicked my ass at that, and your squatting technique was second to none. So the point being is that Ed Coan is a great lifter. Ed Coan was one of those big stepping stones for me to come up and realize that anything was possible. And he was always very generous with his time, his energy, and anything that he could explain to me. Now that I have learned my own system of how to train, it does not look very much like Ed Coan's training. It looks vastly different. And that's the other thing that I learned from Eddie. He was never had an ego on how he trained. He didn't believe that his way was the best way. He just knew that his way was the best way for him. And I think that becomes the hardest thing that we can understand is that, when we do online coaching for clients and we go help with the fire departments or things like this, what we start to realize is that some things that we think are applicable may or may not be at that time. Coaching is just as much of an art form as it is a science. There is no perfect way to train one person. Those things are heavily reliant on how you're built, what your athleticism is, if you have any previous or existing injuries, all these other things. And that's what I liked about Ed Coan and why he's always stayed a mentor for me, is he's always very fluid. He sees an idea that might be better, and he doesn't shut it down even though it's not the way he did things. He's a very open-minded person. So with that being said, this was a wrap-up. This is the story of Ed Coan and what I knew him from and what he continues to be for me. So go on WenningStrength.com. We have a linear periodization program that was based off of the ideas of Ed Coan, and he actually helped me write that. So if you want to look at the manuals, there is a linear periodization of how Ed Coan trained, and you can see it.